So I'm thinking bilingual education would be when you are learning in a language that is not your own. So you're learning two languages at the same time. Your native language and then the language, the second language that you're also learning, and where instruction would be potentially in both languages at the same time, or throughout the school day.
Bilingual education is a type of program that students can go through in order to learn a second language. For example, you would be learning most of your material in your native language, but you'd also be required to take classes in a second language.
My answer might be um, an education that's provided for students in two languages.
Okay.
Bilingual education is learning or teaching a content area in more than one language simultaneously, and I think it's primarily seen with students who don't speak English as their first language but are taught in both their native language and English. And
I have experience personally because I moved to this country 7 years ago, and I had to learn English the hard way, and it took a long time to get used to it, but I managed somehow with the help of friends, family, obviously, and it's just about how hard you try and how much attention you pay to the language you're trying to learn.
I have a lot of experience with that. In Iowa, where I was a principal once before, we had an extensive, what was initially called the ESL program, English as a Second Language. Then it morphed into English language learners, people who are attempting to come to our country and speak English, and it wasn't their primary language. And we had excellent teachers, and really, if people are patient, it can really work effectively.
Seem to really, really succeed. I had a friend who went to a school called Montessori in Anderson, and they were required to learn Spanish like from the time they were in preschool to when they got through high school. And he just was able to communicate with any Spanish speaker and just really excelled. And you could tell that the fact that he was learning it at a young age was really beneficial, because like when you're younger, you're still like a sponge. Young kids are a sponge.
but I've also tutored students who primarily speak Spanish at home and amongst their peers, but are taught only in English. And I think this does them a bit of a disservice, because when I would help them with their homework, I could see that the language barrier prevented them from fully understanding the content and therefore like doing well on their work. So I think that if they were presented with the work in English and Spanish, it would help them a lot more. And I think that's, one of the biggest benefits of bilingual education.
Education.
In my opinion, yeah, because any language that you learn will be helpful to you in the future. Like right now, what I'm doing is I am studying, well, not really studying, but I'm taking some classes to be an interpreter, and that gives you some extra money. Especially if you're a college student, you need money.
I think it definitely would be helpful in the professional world to know more than one language, especially since it'll definitely increase your opportunities for work and place of work. Most students who learn a language in school only learn how to write all the basic stuff. We don't learn how to speak it fluently, and most of us won't ever be able to do that just from the school classes we take. So
I would say yes, just because today in the world, everyone's just speaking different languages, and in the United States especially, there's so much Spanish and stuff. And I think it even makes you understand the subject more if you can understand it in different language and in your own language.
That's a good question. Well, actually, we do, in a sense, have bilingual education in the United States. If you're going to college, you have to take at least 3 consecutive years of a language to qualify for college admission. But there's ways
In order for a public school to do that, I really don't know how they would, because they would have to say this is strictly a Spanish curriculum, and maybe have a couple of subjects. You could get, I'm sure you could get people certified, dual certified, right?
Yeah.
But you couldn't do the whole school like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that it should be a requirement, because if it was, then you would have to decide which languages, and that would be like too hard to decide.
I'm not sure if it should be a requirement, but I definitely think it should be an option.
I think it should be required, however, not mandatory. You give the students the option to take it.
Okay, so in my experience, a lot of people didn't really know what it was at first, and I had to kind of explain that it wasn't ESL, but like learning in two different languages. And I really liked how one person I talked to said that it would be really hard to make this a requirement in public schools, because getting so many educators certified in two languages would just be too hard, and like going forward, like picking which language, like, yeah, so it would just be really hard to do.
One thing that I thought was interesting after watching all of our interviews was that a lot of people didn't think that it should be required. Honestly, the whole required thing isn't really something that I've really thought much about. I do think it's important that we offer classes in different languages for students to learn and like get to experience that environment, but I've never really thought that much about it being required. And I thought that their responses were interesting and that they didn't think it should be required.
Yeah, I thought about the same line of things. I've always thought about it being required, and I thought that it's always been a great idea to have students become fluent in different languages, but I didn't get answers that I was expecting, and I think that kind of threw me for a loop, but it was really cool to hear other opinions about the subject.